The morning I was supposed to walk my daughter down the aisle, I woke up face down on the greenhouse floor with blood pooling beneath my head. The heating system was cranked to maximum. The glass door was padlocked from outside. And through the fogged panels, I could see the wedding tent being set up on my own lawn for a ceremony designed to make my daughter a widow before her first anniversary. But I need to go back a few hours to explain how I ended up here. It was 3:45 in the morning when I gave up on sleep. The ceiling of my bedroom had become an enemy, staring back at me with the same blank indifference it had shown every night since Helen died. 4 years without her, and some nights the bed still felt like an ocean I was drowning in alone. "Big day tomorrow, sweetheart." I whispered it to the empty room the way I always did when something important was happening. A habit I could not break. A habit I did not want to break. I pulled on my robe and slippers and padded downstairs through the dark house. The kitchen clock glowed green in the shadows. 3:47. The wedding was scheduled for 10 in the morning, 6 hours away. 6 hours until I would walk Claire down the aisle at First Presbyterian Church and hand her to Dominic Hale, the man she loved, the man who made her smile again after years of grief. I should have been happy. I should have been at peace. But something sat in my chest like a stone, heavy and cold, and it had been sitting there for weeks. The coffee machine hummed to life. I stood at the kitchen window watching the darkness outside, the silhouette of the Blue Ridge Mountains just barely visible against a sky that had not yet decided whether to become morning. The wedding tent stood ghostly white on the back lawn, its canvas catching the faintest hint of starlight. Tomorrow, 200 people would fill that space for the reception. Tonight, it looked like a tomb. "Stop it," I told myself. "You are being ridiculous. Your daughter is happy. That is what matters." I took my coffee and walked out the back door. The June air hit me warm and heavy, thick with the smell of cut grass and honeysuckle from the fence line. My feet carried me where they always carried me when I could not sleep. Down the stone path, past the rose garden Helen planted the year Claire was born. Past the old magnolia tree where we hung a tire swing 30 years ago. And into the greenhouse. Helen's greenhouse. She built it herself. Or rather, she designed it and stood over the contractor's shoulder until every pane of glass was exactly where she wanted it. 12 feet by 20. With a curved roof that caught the morning sun and shelves lined with orchids, herbs, and the jasmine she loved more than any flower on earth. After she died, I kept it running, watered every plant on her schedule, maintained the temperature controls she had calibrated with the precision of a scientist. It was the closest I could get to her anymore. I set my coffee on the potting bench and breathed in. Warm earth. Damp moss. The faint sweetness of jasmine blooming on the far shelf. Helen's smell. Helen's place. I picked up the watering can and began my rounds, moving between the rows of clay pots, checking soil moisture the way she taught me. My hands worked on autopilot, while my mind drifted. Claire in her wedding dress at the final fitting last week, spinning in front of the mirror, laughing. Dominic standing behind her with that easy smile, his hand resting on her shoulder like he owned her already. Something about that image bothered me. Something I could not name. I was reaching for the jasmine on the top shelf when I heard it. A footstep. Soft, deliberate, directly behind me. On the gravel path, just outside the greenhouse door. I started to turn. The blow came from nowhere. A burst of white-hot pain exploded at the base of my skull, and the world tilted sideways. My knees buckled. The watering can slipped from my fingers and clattered against the concrete floor. Water spreading in a dark pool that mixed with something warmer, something thicker. I hit the ground face first. Tasted copper. Tasted dirt. The greenhouse lights blurred into smears of gold above me. Spinning. Fading. The last thing I heard before the darkness took me was the sound of the padlock clicking shut. A metallic snap. Final. Absolute. The sound of a cage closing around me. Then nothing. When I opened my eyes again, the world was different. Hotter. The air pressed against my face like a wet cloth, thick, and suffocating. Every breath burned. I lay still for a moment, trying to understand where I was, what had happened, why my head screamed with pain, and my shirt was soaked with something warm and sticky. The greenhouse floor. I was still on the greenhouse floor. I pushed myself up on trembling arms. My vision swam. Blood dripped from somewhere above my left eye, spattering the concrete in dark drops. The back of my skull throbbed with a pain so deep it made my teeth ache. I looked up. The heating system panel on the far wall glowed red. Maximum output. 140 degrees Fahrenheit. And climbing. The glass walls around me were completely fogged, moisture streaming down every surface. The air was so thick with heat and humidity that each breath felt like inhaling soup. I staggered to my feet and lurched toward the door. Grabbed the handle. Pulled. It did not move. I pulled again, harder, throwing my weight against it. Nothing. Through the fog on the glass panel beside the door, I could make out the dark shape of a padlock on the outside latch. Brand new, heavy-duty steel. Not mine. Someone had locked me in. I pressed my face against the glass, squinting through the condensation. Beyond the greenhouse, beyond the rose garden, and the stone path, the back lawn stretched out in the early morning light. And there, ghostly and white against the green grass, stood the wedding tent. Workers were already moving around it, arranging chairs, hanging lights, preparing for a celebration that was now less than 4 hours away. My daughter's wedding. My daughter's wedding was in 4 hours, and I was locked inside a greenhouse with the heat climbing toward a temperature that would kill me long before anyone thought to look for me. I slammed my palm against the glass. Tried to shout. But the greenhouse was 200 yards from the main house, hidden behind the magnolia trees and the rose garden. No one would hear me. Not at this hour. Not with the workers focused on the tent. I sank back against the potting bench. Chest heaving. Sweat already pouring down my face. My shirt was drenched. My vision kept blurring at the edges. The wound on my head was still bleeding. Warm rivulets running down behind my ear and dripping onto my collar. Think, Richard. Think. Someone had done this deliberately. Someone had followed me into the greenhouse at 4 a.m, waited until my back was turned, and struck me down. Then locked the door and turned the heat to maximum. This was not a robbery. This was not random. This was a plan. A careful, deliberate plan to make sure I never walked my daughter down that aisle. And then I remembered. The device. The small recording unit I had hidden behind the jasmine pot 4 weeks ago. Tucked between the wall and the shelf where no one would ever think to look. Helen's gift that kept on giving, even from beyond the grave. 4 weeks ago, I would not have had any reason to hide a recording device in this greenhouse. 4 weeks ago, I still believed Dominic Hale was the best thing that ever happened to my daughter. Let me tell you about this greenhouse. Let me tell you about Helen. We married 35 years ago at First Presbyterian Church, the same church where Claire would be walking down the aisle in a few hours if I could not find a way out of this glass prison. Helen wore her mother's vintage hairpin, carried white lilies, and whispered to me at the altar that she was going to build us a garden where we could grow old together. She kept that promise. 2 years after we bought this property in the hills above Asheville, she designed this greenhouse from scratch, drew the plans on napkins at our restaurant. The first one I ever opened. A small bistro on Biltmore Avenue where she ran the kitchen and I handled the front of house. We were young, we were broke, we were happy in a way that only people who have nothing to lose can be. The greenhouse went up panel by panel over the summer of 1993. Helen chose every plant herself. Orchids from a nursery in Charleston. Herbs she grew from seed. And the jasmine, her beloved jasmine, shipped from a grower in Savannah, who swore it was the same variety that grew in old southern estates 200 years ago. She spent every morning in here. Rain or shine, summer or winter, Helen would pad out in her robe and slippers just after dawn, coffee in one hand, pruning shears in the other. She called it her cathedral, the place where she talked to God and to her plants and to whatever quiet part of herself needed tending. When the cancer came, this was the last place she could still go. Even when she could barely walk, I would carry her out here and set her in the wicker chair by the jasmine. She would close her eyes and breathe in, and for a few minutes, the pain would leave her face. "Take care of our Claire," she said to me one morning in this very spot, 3 weeks before the end. Her hand on mine, so thin, I could feel every bone. "Protect her, Richard. Even when it costs you. Especially when it costs you," I promised. And when Helen died, I kept this greenhouse alive, because letting her plants die felt like losing her twice. 4 years I had been watering, pruning, maintaining. 4 years of coming out here before dawn, following her routine, keeping her presence close. The greenhouse became my cathedral too, my place to think, to grieve, to remember. And that is how I heard Dominic. It was a Tuesday evening, 4 weeks before the wedding. Late May, the air just beginning to thicken with summer heat. I was in the greenhouse around 8 in the evening, later than usual, checking the orchids because one of them had been drooping. The glass door was propped open. The evening was quiet. Sound carries strangely on these hills, bouncing off the mountains and sliding through valleys in ways you would not expect. Dominic was on the phone. He was walking along the garden path, maybe 30 feet from the greenhouse, heading toward the guest house where he had been staying for the past 2 weeks, while wedding preparations consumed the estate. He must not have seen me inside. The greenhouse lights were off. I was just a shadow among the plants. His voice reached me clearly through the open door. But it was not the voice I knew, not the warm, charming, slightly self-deprecating tone he used with Claire, with me, with everyone who knew him as the man who adored my daughter. This voice was flat, cold, businesslike. Everything is on schedule. The old man suspects nothing. We move forward, as planned. I froze. My hand stopped midway to the orchid pot. My breath caught in my throat. A pause. Someone speaking on the other end. Then Dominic again. "No, not until after the wedding. We discussed this. 6 months minimum before we can touch the assets without raising flags. The prenup was a problem, but I handled it." She signed the version we needed. My blood turned to ice. The prenup. Claire had signed a prenuptial agreement 3 weeks earlier. I had reviewed it with my lawyer, Douglas Whitmore. Everything looked standard, fair, protective of both parties. Or so I thought. Dominic kept walking. His voice faded slightly as he moved further from the greenhouse, but I caught one more fragment before the distance swallowed his words. "Tell him I have it under control. By December, we will own everything." Then silence. Crickets. The distant hum of the highway beyond the hills. And my heart, pounding so hard, I could hear it in my ears. I stood there in the dark greenhouse for a long time. Minutes. Maybe an hour. My mind racing through every possibility. Every explanation that was not the terrible one forming in my gut. Maybe he was talking about a business deal. Maybe I misheard. Maybe the old man was someone else entirely. But I knew. Deep in the same instinct that had built a $95 million hospitality empire from a single bistro on Biltmore Avenue, I knew something was very wrong. I did not confront him. I did not tell Claire. I did not call the police. Because what did I have? A fragment of a phone call overheard in the dark. No context. No proof. Nothing that would convince my daughter, who was so deeply in love that she would have dismissed me as paranoid, jealous, unable to let go. Instead, I did what any man with 30 years of business experience would do. I gathered information. The next morning, I drove to an electronics store in downtown Asheville and purchased a small digital recording device. Voice activated. 72-hour battery life. Cloud backup to a secure server only I could access. That evening, after Dominic and Claire had gone to dinner, I placed it in the greenhouse behind the jasmine pot, angled toward the garden path where Dominic liked to take his evening calls. For 4 weeks it recorded. Every sound, every conversation within range, every footstep on that gravel path. I checked the cloud files daily from my phone. Most of it was nothing. Birds, wind, my own voice talking to Helen's plants, Elijah humming while he worked the garden beds. But 3 days ago, the night before the rehearsal dinner, the device captured something. A conversation that lasted 11 minutes. 2 voices, Dominic and another man. A man whose voice I could not yet place, but whose tone carried the unmistakable weight of authority. I had not finished listening to the full recording. I had saved it, backed it up, and planned to listen carefully after the wedding festivities quieted down. I thought I had time. I was wrong. Because now I was lying on this greenhouse floor with blood on my face and heat pressing down like a fist. And that recording, those 11 minutes of truth, was the only weapon I had left. The device had been recording for 31 days. And last night, while I slept, it captured everything. The footsteps, the voice, the plan, every sound of my attempted murder, stored safely in the cloud where no padlock could reach it. The heat was getting worse. My shirt clung to my skin like a second layer of flesh, soaked through with sweat and blood. Every breath dragged through my lungs like inhaling through a wet towel. The thermometer on the wall read 138 degrees. In another 30 minutes, maybe less, my body would start shutting down. I pressed my back against the potting bench and looked at my hands, shaking, slick with moisture. And on my left wrist, still fastened where I had put it on yesterday morning out of habit, my smartwatch. My phone was gone, left on the kitchen counter. But the watch had Bluetooth. 2 weeks ago, when my phone was being repaired, I had paired the watch as a backup to the recording device. I had never removed that pairing. My fingers fumbled at the watch face, slippery with sweat. Each tap required concentration. I could barely muster through the fog of heat and pain. Connection found. Device active. Storage. 93%. Full. I scrolled to the most recent file. Timestamp 4:03 this morning. Duration. 7 minutes and 42 seconds. Recorded 18 minutes after I was struck down. I pressed play and held the watch close to my ear. Silence for 10 seconds. Then footsteps. 2 sets of feet on concrete. And a voice. Dominic. He is out cold. Hit him harder than I meant to. But he will not be waking up for a while. Casual. Light. The way a man might discuss a minor inconvenience. A second voice responded. Deeper. Older. Rougher around the edges. Good. And the heating system? Maxed out. By the time anyone thinks to check on him, it will look like he came out here alone and collapsed. Heat exhaustion in an enclosed space. Old man. Early morning. Natural causes at his age. They were not just keeping me from the wedding. They were killing me and making it look like an accident. The second voice spoke again. What about the staff? The gardener comes early. Not until 7, Dominic said. We have 3 hours. By then, the temperature will have done its work. Even if someone finds him, the damage will be irreversible. I looked at the thermometer. 140 now. They were right. At this rate, I had maybe 40 minutes before my organs began to fail. And the recording from Tuesday? The second voice asked with new tension. You are certain? He did not hear enough to act? He has not said a word. Has not changed his behavior. Trusting old fool. The second voice let out a short, hard laugh. Good. After today, the property transfers begin. The girl signs whatever I put in front of her, once she is grieving. Widowed daughters are very compliant. My fists curled so tight my nails drew blood. Widowed daughters. They were counting on Claire's grief. Counting on her being so devastated by losing me that she would sign anything. And Dominic would be there. The loving husband. The supportive partner. The man who murdered her father and then held her while she cried. The timeline is simple, the second voice continued. Wedding today. The old man dies this morning. You console the bride. Within 2 weeks, begin restructuring assets, power of attorney first, then trust modifications. By September, everything is in your name. And yours, Dominic added. 70-30. As we agreed. 60-40. The second voice hardened. I am taking the larger risk. I have history with this man. No one will look closely, Dominic said. Richard Holloway died of heat exhaustion in his own greenhouse. End of story. Silence. Then the second voice, almost a whisper, you had better be right, son. Because if this falls apart, we both go down. Son. The word detonated in my chest. Not a term of endearment between business partners. The way he said it carried weight, carried history, carried blood. Dominic Hale was someone's son. And that someone was standing in my greenhouse, planning my murder, calling the shots. The recording continued. Their voices faded as they moved toward the door. What about after? Dominic asked. Once the assets are transferred, do I stay married to her? Stay as long as necessary. A year. Maybe 2. Then, a quiet divorce. The prenup you switched ensures she keeps nothing. And she never knows. She never knows. The greenhouse door opened and closed. Footsteps on gravel, fading. Then silence. I stopped the playback. My hands shook so badly, the watch nearly slipped off my wrist. Sweat poured into my eyes. The heat was a living thing now, pressing from every direction, stealing my air. But I had proof. Absolute, undeniable proof that Dominic planned to kill me, steal my daughter's inheritance, and disappear. And he was not working alone. Someone guided him, someone who called him son. Someone with history. I scrolled back through the files. Found the 11-minute recording from 3 days ago. Pressed play. The first words made my blood turn to ice. You know, Dominic, I waited 5 years for this. 5 years since that man took everything from me. And now, I am going to take everything from him. I knew that voice. God help me. I knew exactly who it was. Victor Mercer. The name surfaced like a corpse, floating up from black water. 5 years buried in the graveyard of my memory. And here it was. Rising. Rotting. Demanding to be seen. I waited 5 years for this. 5 years since that man took everything from me. His voice on the recording was older now, thinner, scraped raw by bitterness, but unmistakable. The same clipped consonants, the same way he swallowed the ends of his sentences like he was hoarding the words. The same cold authority that used to fill courtrooms and boardrooms across western North Carolina. Victor Mercer. Once the largest real estate developer in the Asheville region. Once the man who owned half the commercial properties on Patton Avenue. Once my competitor. My peer. My neighbor at industry dinners, where we shook hands and smiled and plotted each other's defeat over bourbon and cigars. 5 years ago, I destroyed him. No. That is not fair. He destroyed himself. I simply made sure the truth came to light. It started with the Riverside Commons project. A 20-acre mixed-use development on the French Broad River, right where the tourist district meets the working neighborhoods. Mercer Development had won the bid. Victor was going to build condominiums, restaurants, a boutique hotel. It would have been the crown jewel of his empire, except the land was contaminated. Industrial runoff from a factory that had operated there in the 1970s. Toxic chemicals in the soil, in the groundwater. Victor knew. Internal documents proved he had commissioned environmental studies years earlier that showed dangerous levels of contamination. He buried the reports, paid off the consultants, proceeded with construction plans that would have put hundreds of families in homes built on poison. I found out because one of his former employees came to me. A young environmental engineer named Sarah Chen, who had been fired after refusing to sign off on falsified soil reports. She brought me documents. Proof. Everything. I could have gone to the authorities quietly. Maybe I should have. But Victor Mercer had been cutting corners and endangering people for decades, and every time someone tried to hold him accountable, he hired better lawyers and buried them in litigation. So I did something different. I took the evidence to the Asheville Citizen-Times. Front page. Above the fold, the fallout was immediate and catastrophic. State environmental regulators shut down the project. The EPA launched an investigation. Lawsuits piled up from investors, from the city, from homeowners in adjacent neighborhoods who discovered their water was tainted. Victor's company collapsed in weeks. Bankruptcy, disgrace, criminal charges that resulted in 2 years of probation and $3 million in fines. I testified at the hearing, sat across from him in a federal courtroom, and presented the evidence his own employee had given me. Victor stared at me the entire time. His face was stone. His eyes were furnaces. After the verdict, as marshals escorted him from the courtroom, he stopped beside me. Close enough that I could smell his cologne. Close enough that only I could hear what he said. "You took my life, Holloway. Every brick I laid. Every dollar I earned. Gone because of you. I will return the favor. If it takes me the rest of my life, I will take everything you love and burn it to ashes." I dismissed it. Men say things in the heat of defeat. Threats made in courtrooms rarely survive the parking lot. Victor Mercer disappeared from Asheville, sold what remained of his assets, moved away. I heard rumors he went north, somewhere in Virginia. I stopped thinking about him within a year, but he never stopped thinking about me. 5 years. He had waited 5 years. And in that time, he had found the perfect weapon. His own son, Dominic Mercer. I remembered now. Victor had a son, mid-20s at the time of the trial. I had seen him once in the courtroom gallery, a young man with sharp features and his father's dark hair. He had stared at me with the same burning eyes, but he was young, unremarkable, forgettable. Not anymore. Dominic Mercer had become Dominic Hale. New name, new identity, new history, carefully constructed to withstand casual scrutiny. An architect from Raleigh, he told us. Successful firm, good family. All deceased, unfortunately. How convenient that no one could verify his past, because the people who knew him were all supposedly dead. 16 months ago, he appeared at an art exhibition in downtown Asheville. The same exhibition Claire attended with her college friends. A chance meeting, she told me afterward. He was charming, funny, interested in her work at the foundation, asked her to coffee, then dinner, then weekends together. Then he was everywhere, woven into her life so thoroughly that extracting him seemed impossible. Not chance, not luck. A military operation executed with surgical precision. I pressed play on the recording again. My hands could barely hold steady. The heat was crushing now. 144 degrees. My vision kept narrowing at the edges. Darkness creeping in like a tide. I forced myself to focus. Victor's voice filled my ear again through the tiny watch speaker. "The girl trusts him completely. She has no idea. And Holloway, that arrogant fool, he welcomed my son into his home, shook his hand, gave his blessing. He handed his daughter to a Mercer, and never even knew it." A dry, bitter laugh. Poetic. Is it not? He took my empire with a piece of paper. I will take his with a wedding ring. The recording kept playing, but my consciousness was fading. The heat had become a physical weight, pressing me into the floor. My eyes would not stay open. My heartbeat was wrong. Too fast. Fluttering instead of pounding. I was dying. In Helen's greenhouse, surrounded by her orchids and her jasmine, and 35 years of love made visible in green-growing things, I was dying. She would marry Dominic Mercer in 4 hours. She would grieve her father's tragic accident. And within 6 months, everything I built, Everything Helen and I built together would belong to the man who destroyed us. My vision went black at the edges. The watch slipped from my fingers. The last thing I heard before the darkness pulled me under was the sound of glass breaking. Somewhere far away, somewhere impossibly distant, and a voice. Rough, urgent, familiar in a way that meant safety. Mr. Holloway. Mr. Holloway. Can you hear me? Stay with me, sir. Elijah. The first thing I felt was cold. Not the gentle cool of morning air, but a shock of it, like plunging into a mountain stream. It hit my face, my chest, my arms, and my lungs seized with the sudden change. I gasped, choked, cuffed until my ribs ached. Then hands. Large, rough, calloused hands gripping my shoulders, dragging me across concrete. The scrape of my back against the greenhouse floor, glass crunching under someone's boots. The sound of breathing that was not mine, heavy and urgent and close. Mr. Holloway. Open your eyes, sir. Come on now. Elijah Monroe's face swam into focus above me. Dark skin creased with worry lines that had deepened over 18 years of working this property. Gray at his temples that had not been there when Helen first hired him. Brown eyes that rarely showed emotion now showing plenty of it. Fear. Relief. Determination. He had pulled me through the shattered side panel of the greenhouse. I lay on the grass outside, dew soaking through my shirt, the early morning air washing over me in waves that felt like mercy. Above us, the sky was turning from purple to pale gold, dawn breaking over the Blue Ridge Mountains like it did every morning, indifferent to the fact that I had almost died 20 feet away. Can you hear me, sir? Elijah asked. His voice was steady, but his hands were not. He pressed something cold against the wound on my head. A wet cloth from the garden spigot. How many fingers? I squinted. 3. My voice came out like gravel scraped across sandpaper. Good. Stay still. You are bleeding. What happened in there? I tried to sit up. The world tilted and spun. Elijah's hand pressed firmly against my chest, holding me down. Not yet. Breathe first. Slow breaths. I obeyed. 1 breath. 2. 3. The oxygen felt foreign after the thick soup I had been inhaling inside that glass coffin. Each inhale was a small miracle. Cool air filling spaces that had been starving. Elijah, I managed. What time is it? 5:42. The wedding. What time? 10 o'clock, sir. We have time. But you need to tell me what happened. I looked up at him. This man who had shown up at our door 18 years ago looking for work. Quiet, respectful, carrying nothing but a duffel bag and a reference letter from a nursery in Hendersonville. Helen had hired him on the spot. Said later that she could tell by the way a man touched soil whether he understood growing things, and Elijah understood. He had been here through everything. Through Claire's childhood, through the years of building the business, through Helen's diagnosis and decline and death. He carried Helen's casket. He planted the white roses at her headstone. And every morning for 4 years since, he had arrived at 5:30 on the dot to tend the grounds she loved. 5:30. His routine. The routine Dominic had counted on, not beginning until 7. Dominic was wrong about you, I said. He thought you came at 7. Elijah's eyes narrowed. I come at 5:30. Always have. Miss Helen liked the garden watered before the heat set in. I almost laughed. Almost. 18 years of loyalty and a dead woman's preference for morning watering had just saved my life. I need to sit up, I said. Elijah hesitated, then helped me upright. The world wobbled but held. I leaned against the magnolia tree, its bark rough and solid against my back. Real. Grounding. Someone locked me in the greenhouse, I said. Turned the heat to maximum. Meant for me to die in there before anyone found me. Elijah's jaw tightened. His hands curled at his sides. Who? Dominic. Claire's fiancé. His real name is Dominic Mercer. He is the son of Victor Mercer. I watched Elijah process this. He did not ask who Victor Mercer was. He had been here during the trial 5 years ago, had driven me to the courthouse 3 days in a row, had seen Victor's face in the newspaper. The man who lost everything, Elijah said slowly. The real estate man, yes. And his son has spent 16 months pretending to love my daughter so he could take everything I own. They planned to kill me this morning and make it look like an accident. Heat. Exhaustion. Old man in a greenhouse. Natural causes. Elijah was quiet for a moment. His eyes moved from me to the greenhouse with its shattered panel. Glass, still catching the early light. Then, back to me. And the wedding? He asked. Still happening. In 4 hours. Unless I stop it. He nodded once. A single, decisive motion. The same nod he gave when Helen asked him to dig a new bed, or move a boulder, or pull out a dying tree. The nod that meant he understood the task and would see it through. Tell me what you need, sir. I need my phone. It is on the kitchen counter. I need you to bring it to me without anyone in the house seeing you. Elijah stood. I will be back in 3 minutes. Wait. I grabbed his arm. There is a recording device in the greenhouse. Behind the jasmine pot on the back shelf. If it survived the heat, I need it too. But more importantly, everything on it is backed up to the cloud. Even if the device is destroyed, the evidence is safe. Elijah looked at me with something I had rarely seen in his face. Something beyond loyalty or duty. It was the look of a man who had just been given permission to fight. I will get your phone. I will check the device. And Mr. Holloway? Yes? Miss Helen would want you to end this man. He said it without malice, without heat. Just a simple statement of fact, delivered in the same quiet tone he used to discuss soil conditions and pruning schedules. And it was exactly what I needed to hear. Elijah moved toward the house, quick and silent, his tall frame disappearing around the hedgerow like a shadow. I sat against the magnolia tree, pressing the wet cloth to my head, watching the sky brighten over the mountains. 4 hours. I had 4 hours to destroy the man my daughter loved. 4 hours to break her heart and save her life. 4 hours to keep the promise I made to Helen in this very garden. Protect her, Richard. Even when it costs you. Especially when it costs you. It was about to cost me everything. We have less than 3 hours before that wedding starts. And I need to destroy the man my daughter loves before she gives him her life. Elijah returned in under 4 minutes. He moved through the garden like a man who had walked these paths 10,000 times, which he had. In one hand, my phone. In the other, the recording device, slightly warmed from the greenhouse heat, but intact. The small green light on its side still blinked steadily. Alive. Still capturing. He found me beneath the magnolia tree where he had left me. I was sitting straighter now, the cold cloth pressed to my head, my breathing almost normal. The morning air was doing its work. Each minute outside that glass coffin returned a little more clarity to my mind. Elijah handed me both items without a word and sat on the stone bench beside the garden shed. He waited, patient as soil. I unlocked my phone and opened the cloud backup application. Every file was there. 31 days of recordings, organized by date and timestamp. I scrolled to the 11-minute conversation from 3 days ago and the 7-minute recording from this morning, both safely stored on a server in Atlanta that no padlock or fire or broken device could touch. I looked at Elijah. We need somewhere private. The shed. We moved inside. The garden shed was small, maybe 8 feet by 10, lined with tools and bags of soil and clay pots stacked in towers. It smelled of earth and iron, and the faint sweetness of fertilizer. Helen used to call it Elijah's office. There was a wooden workbench against the back wall and 2 stools. We sat. I played the full 11-minute recording first. Elijah listened without moving. His face did not change, but his hands gripped his knees tighter with every sentence. Victor's voice laying out the entire operation. The false identity, the calculated courtship, the manipulated prenuptial agreement, the timeline for asset transfer, the plan for my death, described in clinical terms, as if they were discussing the demolition of a building rather than the murder of a man. When it ended, Elijah said one word. Police. I nodded. But not just police. I pulled up my contacts and found the number I needed. Detective Sarah Langford. Buncombe County Sheriff's Department. I had met her 3 years ago at a charity event for the local women's shelter that Claire helped organize. Sharp, competent, no nonsense. The kind of person who listened more than she talked and moved faster than you expected when it mattered. She answered on the third ring. Her voice was alert despite the early hour. Mr. Holloway. It is 6 in the morning. What is wrong? Everything, I said. And I told her. It took 8 minutes. I kept it factual, chronological, stripped of emotion. The overheard phone call 4 weeks ago. The recording device. The conversation 3 days ago identifying Victor Mercer and his son's real identity. The attack this morning. The plan to kill me by heat exposure and stage it as an accident. The broader scheme to defraud my daughter of her inheritance. Langford listened without interrupting. When I finished, there was a pause. Then her voice. Harder now. All business. You have these recordings backed up securely? Cloud server. Encrypted. I can share access right now. Do it. Send me everything. I will have a team verify the audio within the hour. In the meantime, tell me about the wedding. 10 o'clock at First Presbyterian? Yes. 200 guests. Dominic will be there. And based on what I heard in the recording, another pause. Shorter this time. She was thinking. Calculating. The same way I did when evaluating a business deal with too many variables. Here is what I need from you, Mr. Holloway. I need you to let the wedding proceed as planned. My stomach dropped. What? If we arrest Dominic now, at the house? Before the ceremony, Victor may not be there. He may hear about it and disappear. You said yourself. The recording indicates he plans to be present at the church. If we wait, if you go through with walking your daughter to that altar, we can take them both at once. Father and son. The entire conspiracy in one move. I closed my eyes. She was right. I knew she was right. If Victor was not caught today, he would vanish. New city, new plan, new target. Maybe my family again, in 5 years or 10. The snake had to be killed at the head. But it meant walking Claire down the aisle toward the man who tried to murder me. It meant watching her smile at him. Watching her believe. Can you do that? Langford asked. Can you keep your composure until the right moment? I looked at Elijah. He met my eyes and gave that single nod again. The one that meant he understood. Yes, I said into the phone. I can do it. Good. I will have plainclothes officers inside the church by 9:30. 2 at the exits, 2 in the pews. I will be there myself near the back. When you give the signal, we move. What signal? You will know when the moment is right. The traditional objection. If you stand and speak, we will be ready. She paused one final time. Mr. Holloway, I want to be clear. What you are describing is attempted murder, conspiracy to commit murder, fraud, and identity theft. These are serious federal charges. Once we move, there is no going back. Your daughter's life will change forever. I know, I said. But she will be alive. We ended the call. I sat in the dim shed, phone in my hands, staring at the wooden floor. Somewhere in the house, 200 yards away, my daughter was probably still asleep, dreaming of her wedding day, dreaming of the man she loved. In 4 hours, I would stand before everyone she knew and expose that man as a fraud, a thief, and a would-be murderer. She would hate me for it, at least for a while. Elijah stood and placed his hand briefly on my shoulder, the way he used to place his hand on a fence post before mending it, testing its strength. "Miss Helen would be proud of you today, sir." I could not speak, so I just nodded. Now came the hardest part. Walking back into my house and pretending this was still the happiest day of my life. I entered through the back door, the same door I had walked out of 3 hours earlier when the world still made sense. The kitchen was exactly as I had left it. Coffee mug on the counter, phone charger dangling from the outlet, the green numbers on the microwave clock reading 6:58. Everything was the same, and nothing would ever be the same again. I moved through the house quietly, avoiding the staircase where I could already hear muffled voices from the upper floor. The bridesmaids had arrived sometime while I was being murdered in my own greenhouse. Their laughter floated down, bright and careless. Someone was playing music, something soft and romantic. The sounds of a wedding morning. Happy sounds. Sounds that belonged to a different reality than the one I was living in. The guest bathroom on the first floor. I locked the door and turned on the light. The man in the mirror was a stranger. Blood had dried in a dark crust along my left temple and behind my ear. My shirt was drenched with sweat, plastered to my chest like a second skin. My face was flushed deep red from the heat exposure, and my eyes were bloodshot, veined with crimson. I looked like a man who had been through something terrible, because I had. I stripped off the shirt and turned on the cold water, washed the blood from my face and neck with slow, deliberate movements. The wound on the back of my head was a 2-inch gash, still tender but no longer bleeding. It sat high enough that my hair, combed carefully, would cover it. No one would see unless they were looking. I cleaned it as best I could. Applied antiseptic from the medicine cabinet and 2 butterfly bandages to hold the edges together. The red in my eyes would not fade quickly, but eye drops helped reduce the worst of it. The flush in my face was already subsiding in the cool air of the house. 20 minutes. That was all it took to erase the evidence of attempted murder from my appearance. 20 minutes to transform myself from a victim back into a father of the bride. I climbed the back stairs to my bedroom and dressed in the navy suit I had chosen 3 months ago. The one Helen would have picked. Classic. Dignified. A father's suit for a father's day. I buttoned the shirt with steady hands, knotted the silver tie, slid the polished shoes onto my feet. In the mirror, Richard Holloway looked exactly as he should. A 63-year-old man in a fine suit, ready to walk his daughter down the aisle. Distinguished. Proud. Perhaps a little emotional. No one would guess that 2 hours ago, this man had been lying in his own blood on a greenhouse floor while his future son-in-law's hired temperature did the killing for him. I straightened my collar and took one long breath. Then I opened the bedroom door and walked downstairs to play the role of my life. The main floor had transformed while I was upstairs. Fresh flowers in every room. White ribbons on the banister. The caterers had arrived through the side entrance and were quietly setting up in the dining room for the post-ceremony brunch. Everything moved with the efficient choreography of a well-planned event. Claire had organized every detail herself. Every flower, every ribbon, every song. She had organized her own destruction without knowing it. I was standing in the living room, adjusting my cufflinks and trying to will my heart rate below 100 beats per minute when I heard her. "Dad. Dad. Is that you?" Her voice from the top of the staircase. Bright. Excited. The voice of a woman on the happiest morning of her life. I looked up, and there she was. Claire stood at the top of the stairs in her white silk robe, hair half curled. One side pinned up with clips, while the other cascaded over her shoulder. No makeup yet. Bare feet on the carpet. She looked like she was 15 again, running downstairs on Christmas morning, full of anticipation and pure untouched joy. She looked like Helen. "Dad, where have you been?" She hurried down the stairs, her robe flowing behind her. "I woke up, and you were not anywhere. Martin said he saw you walking toward the garden around 4, but that was hours ago." I forced the smile, the one I had been rehearsing in the mirror upstairs. The proud father smile. The everything is wonderful smile. Could not sleep, sweetheart. You know how I get before big days. Went for a walk. Checked on the tent. Made sure everything was perfect for you. She reached the bottom step and threw her arms around me. The force of her hug pushed me back half a step. She was warm and alive and smelling of vanilla shampoo, the same scent Helen used to buy for her when she was little. I wrapped my arms around her and held on, tighter than I should have. Longer than was normal. She pulled back slightly, still holding my forearms, and looked up at my face. Her eyes searched mine. The smile faded just a fraction. Dad, have you been crying? Your eyes are red. The question pierced through every layer of composure I had built. Because the answer was no. I had not been crying. I had been suffocating in a 140-degree greenhouse while the man she loved planned my funeral. But I could not say that. Not yet. Not for 3 more hours. I smiled again and touched her face. The same gesture I had used, since she was small enough to fit in my arms. Just thinking about your mother, I said softly. She should be here today. It was not entirely a lie. Helen should be here. Helen would have seen through Dominic Hale in a heartbeat. Helen would have known something was wrong, long before I overheard that phone call in the greenhouse. Helen had always been the sharper one when it came to reading people. Claire's expression melted from concern into tenderness. She squeezed my hands. Oh, Dad. Claire pulled me toward the living room sofa and sat beside me, still holding my hands in hers. Her fingers were warm, soft, the nails freshly manicured and pale pink for the wedding. She studied my face the way Helen used to study a plant that was not thriving, looking for what was wrong beneath the surface. I miss her too, Claire said. Especially today. I keep thinking about what she would say. What advice she would give me. She would tell you to follow your heart, I said. And to make sure the caterer does not overcook the salmon. Claire laughed. A real laugh. Open and bright, and so much like Helen's that it cracked something inside my chest. She leaned her head against my shoulder, the way she had since she was a little girl. We sat like that for a moment. Father and daughter. The last quiet moment we would share before everything shattered. Dad, can I tell you something? Anything, sweetheart. She lifted her head and looked at me with eyes that shone. I know you were worried about Dominic at first. I know you thought it was too fast. That I was rushing into something. Because I was still grieving Mom. I said nothing. Just listened. But he is good, Dad. He is so good to me. The way he listens. The way he remembers small things. The way he holds me when I am sad and does not try to fix it. Just stays. She paused, her voice softening. He reminds me of you, actually, the way you were with Mom. Each word was a blade. Thin and precise, sliding between my ribs without her knowing it. He reminds me of you. The man who cracked my skull open 4 hours ago. The man whose father planned my death over the phone like ordering supplies for a construction project. He reminded her of me. That means a lot, sweetheart, I managed. My voice sounded almost normal. Almost. Claire stood suddenly, energy returning to her movements. Oh, before I forget. She disappeared into the hallway and returned a moment later holding a small velvet box. I have something for you. She opened it. Inside, resting on cream silk, was Helen's brooch. A small gold pin, shaped like a sprig of jasmine, set with 3 tiny emeralds. Helen's mother had given it to her on our wedding day. Helen had worn it every anniversary for 30 years. After she died, I put it in the jewelry box on her dresser and could not bring myself to move it. I had it cleaned and polished, Claire said. She lifted the brooch carefully from the box. I want you to wear it today. Mom's with us today, Dad. Walking with us. She leaned forward and pinned it to the lapel of my navy suit. Her fingers worked gently, precisely, securing the clasp. The small gold jasmine caught the morning light from the window. 3 green emeralds like 3 small eyes watching. Helen's jasmine. From Helen's greenhouse. The same greenhouse where her plants still grew, where her jasmine still bloomed, where 4 hours ago someone tried to end my life among the things she loved most. There. Claire stepped back and admired her work. Perfect. Now, she is officially part of the day. I looked down at the brooch on my chest. Gold and green against navy blue. Helen. Pinned over my heart like she had always been. It is beautiful, I said. Thank you, Claire beamed. Then her phone buzzed from the pocket of her robe. She pulled it out, glanced at the screen, and her face lit up even brighter. Dominic says he cannot wait to see me, she said, reading the text. He says he barely slept last night. Too excited. I bet he barely slept, I thought. Hard to sleep when you are busy planning a murder and locking old men in greenhouses. Tell him he is a lucky man, I said instead. Claire typed back quickly, smiling at the screen with a softness that made me want to grab the phone from her hands and throw it against the wall. She was texting the man who tried to kill her father, sending heart emojis to the son of a man who wanted to steal everything she owned. And she had no idea. No idea at all. Oh, the girls are calling me. Claire tucked her phone away and leaned in to kiss my cheek, quick and warm. Her lips left a faint trace of vanilla on my skin. I have to finish hair and makeup. The photographer arrives at 8:30. She started up the stairs, then turned back halfway. Her robe billowed around her bare feet. The morning light caught her hair, turning it gold. Dad? Yes? I love you. You know that, right? No matter what happens today, or any day, you are the best father anyone could ask for. The words hit me like a wave. I gripped the arm of the sofa to keep myself steady. I love you too, Claire. More than you will ever know. She smiled one last time and disappeared up the stairs. Her footsteps faded into the sound of laughter and music from the bridesmaid's room. A door closed, and I was alone. I sat there for a full minute without moving, staring at the empty staircase where my daughter had just stood glowing with happiness. In less than 3 hours, I would take that happiness and crush it in front of 200 people. I would stand before everyone she loved and tell them that the man she adored was a lie, that her wedding was a crime, that her father had almost been killed in the same garden where her mother used to find peace. She would hate me. Maybe not forever, but for a long time. Long enough to feel like forever. I looked down at Helen's brooch on my lapel, touched it gently with one finger. I am going to break her heart today, I whispered. Help me put it back together after. The gold jasmine glittered in the light. Silent. Steady. Helen had never answered my whispers. But somehow, wearing her brooch, I felt less alone. I stood, straightened my tie, checked the wound beneath my hair one more time. Then I walked toward the front of the house to wait for the limousine that would carry my daughter and me to church. I held her close and memorized the feeling. Because in 2 hours, she would look at me the way she had never looked at me before. Like I was the one who had betrayed her. The white limousine pulled up the driveway at 8:30 sharp. I watched it approach from the front window, its polished surface catching the morning sun like a mirror on wheels. Behind me, the house erupted in a final frenzy of activity. Bridesmaids rushing down the staircase in their pale green gowns. The photographer snapping candid shots in the foyer. Someone calling for hairpins. Someone else searching for a lost earring. And then Claire appeared at the top of the stairs. The noise stopped. Every voice fell silent. Every eye turned upward. And for a moment, the entire house held its breath. She was stunning. The wedding dress fit her, as if it had been woven directly onto her body. Ivory silk, with delicate lace sleeves that ended at her wrists. A sweetheart neckline. A train that cascaded behind her like water flowing over marble. Her hair was swept up in soft curls, secured with Helen's vintage hairpin, the same one her grandmother wore, the same one Helen wore when she married me 35 years ago. She looked exactly like her mother. So precisely, so perfectly, like Helen on our wedding day. that my vision blurred, and I had to grip the banister to stay upright. The photographer's shutter clicked rapidly. The bridesmaids gasped and whispered. Claire descended slowly, one hand trailing along the railing, her eyes finding mine across the room. "Well?" she said softly. "How do I look?" I could not answer immediately. My throat had closed. My eyes burned, not from the greenhouse. From this, from seeing my daughter transformed into a bride, radiant with a happiness I was about to destroy. "You look like your mother," I finally said. "And that is the highest compliment I know how to give." Claire's eyes filled. She blinked quickly, fanning her face with her hands. "Do not make me cry." Makeup took 45 minutes. The bridesmaids laughed. The photographer captured the moment, and I stood there wearing Helen's brooch over my heart, carrying the weight of what I knew like a boulder strapped to my back. The drive to First Presbyterian took 12 minutes. 12 minutes through the streets of Asheville that Helen and I had walked together for 3 decades. Past the bistro on Biltmore Avenue where we started our empire with nothing but good food and stubborn hope. Past the park where Claire took her first steps on a September afternoon, while Helen filmed with a camcorder the size of a shoebox. Past the hospital where Helen spent her last days and where I held her hand until it went cold. Every street was a memory. Every corner was a ghost. Claire sat beside me in the limousine, her bouquet of white lilies resting on her lap. Her fingers fidgeted with the ribbon wrapped around the stems. She was nervous. Happy nervous. The good kind. "Dad," she said quietly, watching the city pass through the tinted glass. "Yes? Do you think Mom would have liked Dominic?" The question landed like a punch hidden inside a kiss. Gentle delivery. Devastating impact. I turned to look at her and saw the vulnerability there, the little girl still seeking her parents' approval even at 29. What could I say? The truth would end this conversation and this charade 3 hours too early. The lie would taste like poison. So I found the narrow space between them. "I think your mother would have wanted you to be happy," I said carefully. "That was always her priority. Your happiness." Claire nodded slowly, considering this. But would she have liked him? Specifically, I thought about Helen, about her instincts, about the way she could read a room, read a face, read the silence between words better than anyone I had ever known. Would she have liked Dominic Hale? No. Helen would have seen through him in a week. Maybe less. She would have wanted to get to know him better, I said. Your mother never rushed to judgment about people. That was true enough. Helen never rushed. But she always arrived at the truth eventually. Claire leaned her head against my shoulder. The veil brushed my cheek, light as a whisper. "I think she would have loved him," she said. "The way he takes care of me. The way he pays attention." She always said that is what matters most. Not money or status. Just someone who pays attention. Pays attention. Yes, Dominic certainly paid attention. To our routines. To our finances. To the layout of our estate and the location of every asset worth taking. I wrapped my arm around her shoulder and held her close. Through the window, the streets continued to scroll past. Familiar places, carrying unfamiliar weight. My phone vibrated in my jacket pocket. I shifted carefully so Claire would not notice and glanced at the screen. Detective Langford. A text message. Victor Mercer confirmed inside church. Row 12, left side. Entered at 9:05, posing as business associate of groom. Officers in position. All exits covered. We are ready when you are. I read it twice, then deleted it and slipped the phone back into my pocket. Victor was there, sitting in my church. The same church where Helen and I exchanged vows. The same church where we christened Claire. The same church where Helen's funeral filled every pew with mourners. Victor Mercer was sitting in a pew at that church, waiting to watch his son marry my daughter, waiting to watch the final piece of his revenge fall into place. He thought he had won. He thought this was his victory lap, The spire of First Presbyterian appeared above the tree line. Gray stone against blue sky. The bell tower rising like a finger, pointed at heaven. 200 people were already inside, seated and waiting. Claire lifted her head and looked out the window. Her breath caught. "This is really happening," she whispered. I looked at the church growing larger through the windshield, at the stone walls that held 35 years of my family's history, at the place where my life was about to change. Forever. Again. Yes, I thought. But not the way you think. First Presbyterian Church of Asheville rose before us like a fortress built from prayer. Gray stone walls darkened by a century of mountain rain. Gothic arches framing windows of stained glass that told stories of mercy and judgment in jeweled light. The bell tower stood sentinel above, its shadow falling across the front steps where guests lingered in the June morning sun, greeting each other with handshakes and embraces. The limousine eased to a stop at the side entrance, away from the gathering crowd. I stepped out first and offered Claire my hand. She took it, gathering her train with the other, and stood beside me on the flagstone path. For a moment, we just looked at the church together. "I was married here," I said. 35 years ago. Your mother wore a dress half as expensive and looked twice as beautiful." Claire squeezed my hand. "I know, Dad." She told me 100 times. I guided her toward the bridal preparation room, a small chamber off the west corridor where the bridesmaids were already waiting. Their voices carried through the heavy wooden door, bright and eager. Claire paused at the threshold and turned to me. "See you out there?" she said. I kissed her forehead. "Would not miss it." She disappeared inside, swallowed by a wave of excited voices and rustling fabric. The door closed, and I was alone in the corridor with the sound of my own heartbeat and the weight of what was coming. I walked toward the sanctuary. My shoes echoed against the stone floor. The hallway was cool and dim, lit by sconces that cast warm amber pools along the walls. Ahead, the double doors to the main sanctuary stood open, revealing the space beyond. 200 people filled the pews. Business associates in tailored suits. Old friends from the restaurant industry. Claire's college classmates. Neighbors who had known our family for decades. They sat in quiet conversation, programs in hand, watching the altar where white lilies and candles waited for the ceremony to begin. I entered from the side and made my way toward the front, smiling, nodding, shaking hands, playing the part. "Richard, wonderful day. Congratulations. Claire must be thrilled. Helen would be so proud. Helen would be so proud." I heard it 6 times before I reached the 3rd row. Each time, I smiled and agreed and kept moving. "Keep walking. Keep smiling. Do not look at row 12 yet. Not yet." I greeted Douglas Whitmore, my lawyer, seated near the front. He clasped my hand warmly. "Big day, Pete. How are you holding up?" "Holding," I said. "Just holding." He laughed, misunderstanding entirely. Then I moved on, working my way along the center aisle like a man without a care in the world. And then I looked. Row 12. Left side. 3rd seat from the aisle. Victor Mercer sat with his hands folded neatly in his lap. He was thinner than I remembered. The years had carved deep lines into his face, hollowed out his cheeks, turned his once dark hair to iron gray. He wore a charcoal suit, well cut but not expensive. The suit of a man who once owned everything and now owned nothing. But his eyes, those had not changed. Dark and burning. Furnaces behind glass. The same eyes that had stared at me across a federal courtroom 5 years ago while I presented the evidence that ended his career, his fortune, his life as he knew it. He saw me looking. Our eyes locked across the rows of unsuspecting guests, and Victor Mercer smiled. It was a small smile. Controlled. The smile of a chess player who believes he is 3 moves from checkmate. The smile of a man watching his revenge unfold exactly as planned. He inclined his head slightly, a gesture of polite acknowledgement, as if we were merely acquaintances Reconnecting at a social event. I nodded back, matched his calm with my own, held his gaze for exactly 2 seconds, then turned away as if he were nobody, as if my pulse were not hammering, as if I had not just looked into the eyes of the man who ordered my death. I made my way to the front pew, reserved for the father of the bride, sat down, crossed my legs, folded my hands, the picture of composed anticipation. From this position, I could see everything. The altar draped in white cloth and adorned with lilies, the candles flickering in brass holders along the communion rail, the stained glass window behind the pulpit depicting Christ in the garden, hands raised, light streaming from above. Pastor David Whitfield, standing near the vestry door, Bible in hand, waiting for his cue, and the side exits. Both of them, where I knew plainclothes officers now stood, disguised as ushers, hands clasped before them, eyes scanning. My phone vibrated one final time. I glanced down. Langford. Audio file received and verified. Arrest warrant signed. Ready on your signal. Good luck, Mr. Holloway. I deleted the message. Then the vestry door opened, and Dominic Hale stepped into view. He looked impeccable. Black tuxedo, perfectly tailored. White pocket square folded with geometric precision. His dark hair styled just so. He moved with the easy confidence of a man born to stand at altars, to command attention, to make people believe whatever story he chose to tell. He took his position beside the pastor and surveyed the congregation with a warm, slightly nervous smile. The groom on his big day. Humble, grateful, in love. His best man followed. A college friend named Jason. Something. I had met him twice. He was probably real, probably innocent, probably had no idea that the man he was standing beside had tried to murder someone 4 hours ago. Dominic's eyes swept the pews and found me in the front row. His smile widened. He gave me a small nod. Respectful, affectionate. The nod of a son-in-law who genuinely admires his father-in-law. I nodded back. And behind my composed expression, behind the proud father mask, behind Helen's jasmine brooch glittering on my lapel, a single thought repeated itself. He thought he was watching me hand my daughter to his weapon. He did not know I was about to detonate his entire plan. The organ breathed to life. Low notes first, rolling through the sanctuary like distant thunder, filling the vaulted stone ceiling with sound, then higher notes layered on top, building into the processional that signaled the beginning. Everyone stood. 200 people rising as one, turning toward the back of the church. Programs rustled. Cameras lifted. Whispers faded into reverent silence. The bridesmaids entered first. 3 of Claire's closest friends, walking in measured steps down the center aisle in their pale green gowns. They carried small bouquets of white roses and smiled at familiar faces as they passed. One by one, they took their positions at the front of the sanctuary, opposite Dominic and his best man. Then the music changed. The organist shifted into the bridal march. Those unmistakable notes that had opened a million weddings and would open a million more. The melody that told every person in every pew that the bride was coming, that the moment had arrived. The great wooden doors at the back of the cathedral swung open, and there was Claire. She stood framed in the doorway, backlit by morning sun pouring through the entrance behind her. The light caught her dress, turning the ivory silk luminous, almost glowing. Her veil cascaded down her back like a waterfall frozen in time. She held her bouquet of white lilies against her waist, and her eyes, Helen's eyes, scanned the sanctuary until they found mine. She smiled. And God forgive me. I smiled back. I walked to her. Each step toward the back of the church felt like walking against a current, like the air itself was trying to push me back, warning me, begging me to stop this now before it went any further. But I kept moving. Because the plan required it. Because Langford needed Victor and Dominic in the same room at the same time. Because this had to end publicly and completely, or it would never truly end at all. I reached her. She was trembling. I could feel it through the thin fabric of her sleeve when she tucked her hand into the crook of my elbow. A fine vibration, like a hummingbird's wing. Nerves and joy and anticipation all woven together. "Ready?" I asked. My voice was steady. "How?" "I will never know." "Ready." She breathed the word more than spoke it. We stepped forward together. The first step onto the white runner that stretched down the center aisle like a road with only one destination. The organs swelled around us. 200 faces turned toward us, smiling, some already crying. Cameras flashed in soft bursts of light. Each step was a memory. Each footfall landed on a moment from the past that rose up through the floor and pressed against my chest. Step. Claire at 5 years old, holding my hand at the grocery store, asking why the sky was blue. Step. Claire at 12, crying because the other girls said her clothes were wrong. Helen holding her, while I paced the hallway, feeling useless. Step. Claire at 16, slamming her bedroom door after our first real argument. Me standing outside it for an hour, not knowing what to say. Step. Claire at 22, graduating college, throwing her cap in the air. Helen beside me, already sick but hiding it, applauding until her thin hands went red. Step. Claire at 25, standing beside me at Helen's casket. Both of us in black, neither of us able to speak. Her hand in mine, the only thing keeping either of us upright. Step, step, step. 29 years compressed into a 30-second walk. Every joy and every wound. Every laugh and every silence. Every moment that had built us into what we were. Father and daughter, bound together by love and loss, and a woman who was gone but never truly absent. We reached the altar. The organ faded. Silence filled the sanctuary like water filling a glass. Dominic stood waiting. His face was arranged in an expression of pure adoration. Eyes soft, smile gentle, the slight tremble of a nervous groom. His hand extended toward Claire, ready to receive her, ready to take her from me. I looked at that hand. The hand that had swung something heavy at the back of my skull 4 hours ago. The hand that had turned the heating dial to maximum. The hand that had clicked a padlock shut and walked away, leaving me to die slowly among my dead wife's flowers. And I placed my daughter's hand in it. Her fingers slipped from my arm and into his grasp. He held them gently, carefully, the way a man holds something precious, or the way a man holds something he plans to use. Claire turned to me one last time, her eyes shining, her smile so full of trust that it split my heart cleanly in two. "I love you, Dad. I love you too, sweetheart. Always." I kissed her forehead, felt her warmth one final time. Then I stepped back and walked to the front pew, sat down, crossed my legs, folded my hands in my lap, calm, composed. The proud father watching his daughter begin her new life. Inside, I was counting minutes, counting heartbeats, counting the seconds until Pastor Whitfield reached the words that would give me permission to stand and speak and burn this entire ceremony to the ground. Helen's brooch pressed against my chest. My phone sat heavy in my jacket pocket, loaded with 11 minutes of audio that would end Dominic Hale's carefully constructed life. In the pew across the aisle, Victor Mercer watched the altar with satisfaction gleaming in his dark eyes. Not yet. Not yet. But soon. The pastor opened his Bible and began to speak. And I sat in the front row, hands steady, face neutral, waiting for the moment that would change everything. The countdown had begun. "Dearly beloved," Pastor Whitfield began, his voice filling the sanctuary with the practiced authority of a man who had spoken these words hundreds of times. "We are gathered here today in the presence of God and these witnesses to unite this man and this woman in holy matrimony." The words floated through the still air, landing softly on the congregation like the first drops of rain. People settled deeper into their pews. Hands reached for hands. Tissues appeared in anticipation of tears. Marriage is not to be entered into lightly, the pastor continued. It is a sacred covenant, a bond of trust between two people who have chosen to share their lives in complete honesty, in faithful devotion, and in unwavering commitment to one another. Trust, honesty, devotion. Every word was a blade pressed against my restraint. I sat motionless in the front pew, hands folded, face composed. But beneath the surface, every muscle in my body was coiled tight. Waiting. It requires courage, Pastor Whitfield said, looking from Dominic to Claire with warm approval. Courage to be vulnerable. Courage to give yourself fully to another person without reservation. And above all, courage to speak truth, even when truth is difficult. Courage to speak truth. I almost laughed. The irony was so thick, I could taste it. At the altar, Dominic held Claire's hands in his. His thumbs traced small circles on her knuckles, a gesture so intimate, so tender, that several women in the pews sighed audibly. His eyes were locked on hers with an intensity that looked like pure devotion, the performance of a lifetime. His masterpiece. Claire gazed back at him, radiant, trusting, completely, devastatingly, unaware. I thought of Helen. Not the Helen of photographs and memory, the Helen of 5 years ago, lying in a hospital bed with monitors beeping beside her and tubes running into her arms. Thin, fading, but her eyes still fierce, still burning with the same fire that had built a greenhouse and raised a daughter and loved one man for 30 years. Protect our Claire, Richard. Even when it costs you. Especially when it costs you. It was about to cost me everything I had left. Sometimes love means breaking their heart to save their life, Helen had whispered. Her hand in mine. Barely any strength left, but enough to squeeze. Enough to make me promise. I promised, Helen. I am keeping it now. The pastor's voice continued, weaving through scripture and sentiment. He spoke of partnership, of patience, of the joining of two families into one. He quoted Corinthians. Love is patient. Love is kind. It does not envy. It does not boast. Love does not attempt to murder your bride's father in a greenhouse at 4 a.m. Time stretched. Each minute lasted an hour. I was aware of everything. The flicker of candlelight on polished brass, the faint scent of lilies drifting from the altar arrangements, the weight of Helen's brooch on my lapel, the phone in my pocket, heavy as a loaded weapon. Victor Mercer's presence in row 12, radiating quiet satisfaction like heat from a stove. Then Pastor Whitfield shifted his tone. His voice took on a new formality, a ceremonial gravity that signaled what was coming. Before these two exchanged their vows, he said, straightening slightly, I am bound by tradition and by law to ask this question of all present. My heart rate doubled. My fingers uncurled from their folded position. Beneath my calm exterior, adrenaline flooded my bloodstream like ice water. If any person here today knows of any legal impediment or lawful reason why these two should not be joined in marriage, the silence that followed was absolute. 200 people held their breath. The candles flickered. The stained glass saints watched from their windows with painted eyes that saw everything and judged nothing. Let them speak now. I placed my hands on the pew in front of me, or forever hold their peace. I stood. The sound of the wooden pew creaking beneath me echoed through the sanctuary like a crack of thunder in a clear sky. Sharp, sudden, impossible to ignore. 200 heads turned. 200 pairs of eyes locked onto me. The father of the bride, standing in the front row, face calm, jaw set, eyes fixed on the altar. I object. 2 words. Spoken clearly, without tremor, without hesitation. They hit the air and detonated. The sanctuary erupted in gasps. Whispered exclamations rippled through the pews like wildfire. What did he say? Oh my God. What is happening? Claire spun around, her face draining of color. Dad? Her voice cracked on the single syllable. Dad, what are you doing? Wayframation of a second. The mask slipping to reveal something beneath. Shock. Calculation. Fear. Then it was back. The concerned groom. The bewildered fiancé. Mr. Holloway, he said, his voice perfectly modulated. Confused but kind. I am sure whatever this is, we can discuss it privately. I did not look at him. I looked at my daughter, at her white dress and her trembling bouquet, and Helen's hairpin in her curls, and the tears already forming in her beautiful, betrayed eyes. I am sorry, sweetheart, I said. My voice carried across the stone walls, clear and final. But this wedding cannot proceed. And when you hear why, you will understand. I reached into my jacket pocket. My fingers closed around my phone. I pulled it out, unlocked it with my thumb, and opened the audio file. 11 minutes and 14 seconds of truth. I pressed play, and then I held the phone toward the altar, toward my daughter, toward the man who had tried to kill me, and let the recording speak for itself. Dominic's voice filled the church. Not the warm, charming voice that had courted my daughter for 16 months. Not the gentle tone that whispered sweet things and remembered her coffee order and called her by the pet names that made her blush. This was the other voice, the one I had heard through my smartwatch on the greenhouse floor. Cold. Clinical. Stripped of everything human. He is out cold. Hit him harder than I meant to. But he will not be waking up for a while. The words bounced off stone walls that had held a century of prayers. They echoed through vaulted ceilings, designed to carry hymns toward heaven. They reached every ear, in every pew, with absolute, devastating clarity. The phone's speaker was small, but the sanctuary's acoustics did the rest. First Presbyterian was built for the human voice. Every whisper at the altar reached the back row. Every confession carried to the rafters. And now Dominic Hale's confession carried too. Good. And the heating system? Victor's voice. Older. Harder. Commanding. Maxed out. By the time anyone thinks to check on him, it will look like he came out here alone and collapsed. Heat exhaustion. Natural causes at his age. A collective sound rose from the congregation. Not quite a gasp. Something deeper. A groan of dawning horror. 200 people realizing simultaneously that what they were hearing was not a mistake, not a misunderstanding, not a father's paranoid delusion. It was a confession of attempted murder. Claire stood frozen at the altar. Her hands still extended where Dominic had been holding them a moment ago, but he had dropped them. His arms hung at his sides. His face had gone the color of old cement. The recording continued. I held the phone steady. My hand did not shake. After today, the property transfers begin. The girl signs whatever I put in front of her once she is grieving. Widowed daughters are very compliant. Claire flinched as if she had been struck. Her mouth opened. No sound came out. The timeline is simple. Wedding today. The old man dies this morning. You console the bride. Within 2 weeks, begin restructuring assets. By September, everything is in your name and yours. 70-30, 60-40. I am taking the larger risk. I have history with this man. I paused the recording. The silence that followed was so complete, I could hear the candle flames hissing in their holders. Every face in the sanctuary was turned toward me. White. Stricken. Uncomprehending. Then I spoke. The second voice on that recording belongs to a man sitting in this church right now. I kept my tone even. Factual. The way I had presented evidence in a courtroom 5 years ago. His name is Victor Mercer. He is sitting in row 12 on the left side. And Dominic Hale is not Dominic Hale. His real name is Dominic Mercer, Victor's son. Every head swiveled toward row 12. Victor Mercer sat perfectly still for one heartbeat. 2. His dark eyes met mine across the sanctuary. And in them, I saw the moment he understood. The moment his 5-year revenge collapsed around him like a building with its foundations pulled out. He moved. Fast for a man of 67. He was on his feet and pushing past the couple beside him, heading for the side exit, with quick, desperate strides. His composure had shattered. His face was twisted with fury and panic in equal measure. He made it 4 steps. 2 men in dark suits materialized from the shadows near the exit. They did not run, did not shout, simply stepped into Victor's path with the calm efficiency of people who had done this many times before. One placed a hand on Victor's chest. The other moved behind him. Victor Mercer. Buncombe County Sheriff's Department. You are under arrest. Victor's mouth opened. Closed. Opened again. His eyes darted wildly from the officers, to me, to the altar where his son stood paralyzed. Then the fight went out of him. His shoulders dropped. His hands were pulled behind his back, and the metallic click of handcuffs echoed through the silent church. You, he hissed at me as they turned him toward the door. His voice was raw, broken. You ruined me once. And now, he did not finish. The officers guided him forward. The congregation watched in stunned silence as Victor Mercer, the architect of this entire nightmare, was walked down the center aisle in handcuffs. Past the white roses, past the wedding programs, past 200 witnesses who would never forget what they had just seen. The heavy doors closed behind him with a sound like a tomb sealing shut. I turned back to the altar. Dominic had not moved. He stood exactly where he had been standing when the recording started. His tuxedo still perfect, his pocket square still crisp, but his face was a ruin. Pale, hollow. The mask was gone entirely now, and what remained underneath was something small and cornered and afraid. Claire stood 3 feet from him. Her veil had slipped from its pins and hung crookedly over one shoulder. Her bouquet dangled from her left hand, the stems loosening in her grip, white lilies tilting toward the floor. She was staring at Dominic. Not with anger. Not yet. Anger would come later. Right now, her face held something worse. The slow, crushing weight of understanding. The moment when everything you believed about your life rearranges itself into a shape you cannot recognize. Tell me it is not true, she whispered. Her voice barely carried past the first row. Tell me that was fake. Tell me someone made that up. Tell me you did not. She could not finish. The bouquet slipped from her fingers. White lilies scattered across the altar steps. Petals broke free and drifted to the stone floor like snow falling in a church that had suddenly gone very cold. Dominic opened his mouth. And for the first time since I had known him, no words came out. He did not run. I expected him to. Every scenario I had imagined during those hours of planning ended with Dominic bolting for the nearest exit, shoving past the bridesmaids, crashing through a side door, sprinting into the parking lot where more officers waited. But Dominic Mercer did not run. Instead, slowly, like a man whose strings had been cut one by one, he sank to his knees, right there at the altar, his tuxedo creasing against the stone floor, his hands falling open at his sides, his head bowing forward until his chin nearly touched his chest. The sanctuary held its breath. Claire. His voice was barely audible. A whisper meant only for her, but the church's acoustics carried it to every ear. I am sorry. She stared down at him, tears streaming silently. Her hands clenched at her sides, fingers still bearing the ghost impression of the bouquet she had dropped. Sorry, she repeated. The word came out hollow, empty of meaning. Dominic lifted his head, and what I saw in his face surprised me. It was not calculation, not the scramble of a con man searching for his next lie. It was something else, something that looked horribly, impossibly like genuine pain. "I did not plan for this," he said. His voice cracked at the edges. "I did not plan to feel anything. You were supposed to be a transaction, a means to an end. My father's revenge, and nothing more." Claire made a small sound. A wounded animal noise that cut through me worse than the blow to my skull had. "But you were not nothing," Dominic continued. His eyes were wet, glistening under the candlelight. "Part of it became real, Claire. I need you to know that. Part of it was real." The silence that followed stretched like wire pulled to its breaking point. Claire stared at him. I could see her processing his words, turning them over, testing them against everything she knew, everything she had just heard on that recording. Then her expression hardened. The softness left her face like water draining from a basin. What remained was stone. "You tried to kill my father." Her voice was quiet but absolute. "You locked him in a greenhouse and turned up the heat and walked away. You left him to die this morning while I was upstairs curling my hair and dreaming about marrying you. Claire, do not say my name." 2 officers appeared at the altar steps. They moved with the same calm professionalism as the pair who had taken Victor. One spoke quietly. "Dominic Mercer, you are under arrest for attempted murder, conspiracy to commit murder, fraud, and identity theft. You have the right to remain silent." Dominic did not resist. He extended his hands without being asked. The cuffs closed around his wrists with that same metallic finality. He stood, guided by the officers, and for one moment his eyes found mine across the altar. I expected hatred, fury, the same burning look his father had given me. But Dominic's eyes held something different. Resignation, and beneath it, buried deep but visible, something that might have been shame. The officers turned him toward the aisle. He walked between them with his head slightly bowed. Past the scattered lilies, past the stunned congregation, past the candles still flickering in their holders as if nothing had changed. At the 5th row he stopped, looked back once. Not at me, at Claire. She did not look back. The doors opened and closed, and he was gone. The sanctuary exhaled. Voices erupted. People standing, turning to each other, hands over mouths. Shock and outrage and confusion pouring through the pews, like a flood breaking through a dam. Someone was crying loudly near the back. Someone else was already on their phone, but I was not watching them. I was watching Claire. She stood exactly where she had been standing throughout all of it. At the altar, in her white dress, with scattered lilies at her feet, and her veil hanging crooked, and her face utterly, completely blank, like a house with the lights turned off, like a person who had left their own body and was watching from somewhere far away. Then her knees buckled. I caught her. My hands found her arms before she hit the ground. I lowered her gently to the altar steps and knelt beside her, holding her against my chest the way I had held her as a baby, the way I held her when Helen died, the way fathers hold their daughters when the world breaks open and there is nothing else to offer but presence. She did not sob. Not at first. She just sat there, rigid, staring at nothing. Then a sound escaped her, low and broken and barely human, and the tears came all at once. "You knew," she said against my shoulder, her voice muffled by the fabric of my suit. "You knew all morning. You walked me down the aisle. You smiled. You let me believe." "Yes," I said. I held her tighter. "Why? Why did you not just tell me?" "Because you needed to hear it yourself. From his own mouth. In front of everyone. So there could never be any doubt. So he could never talk his way back in." She pulled back just enough to look at my face. Her mascara ran in dark rivers down her cheeks. Her eyes were red and swollen, and searching mine for something. Truth. Explanation. Forgiveness. "He tried to kill you," she whispered. "This morning. While I slept." "Yes." "And you still walked me down the aisle." "Yes." How? How could you do that? I touched her face, wiped a tear from her cheek with my thumb. The same gesture. Always the same gesture. Since she was small enough to fit in one arm, because your mother asked me to protect you. Even when it cost me. Especially when it cost me. Claire's face crumbled. She fell against me and I held her. The church emptied around us in slow waves. Friends lingering, unsure. The pastor standing nearby with his Bible closed and his face pale. Douglas Whitmore speaking quietly to someone near the door. The photographer lowering his camera, knowing some moments were not meant to be captured. Eventually it was just us. Father and daughter. Kneeling on the altar steps of a church that held all our family's history. Surrounded by scattered white lilies and dying candlelight. And a silence that felt less like emptiness and more like the space after a storm passes. Claire's breathing slowed. Her grip on my jacket loosened. She was still. Not peaceful, but still. What happens now? She asked. Her voice very small. We go home, I said. And we heal. She nodded against my chest. And for a long time, neither of us moved. 3 days after the wedding that never was, I replaced the broken glass panel in the greenhouse. I did it myself. No contractor, no help. Just me and a sheet of tempered glass, and the old putty knife Helen used to keep in the top drawer of the potting bench. It took most of the afternoon. My hands were not as steady as they used to be, and the wound on my head still throbbed when I bent forward. But I needed to do this alone. Needed to feel the weight of the glass in my hands. Needed to set it into the frame and seal it shut, and know that the space where Elijah had broken through to save me was whole again. The greenhouse had to be repaired. Because it was Helen's. And because what happened inside, it would not be the last thing these walls remembered. I reset the heating system to its proper calibration. Watered the orchids. Checked the jasmine on the top shelf. Every plant had survived. The heat that nearly killed me had not killed them. Hardy things. Helen's plants. Built to endure. The legal proceedings moved quickly. Detective Langford had built an airtight case. The recordings alone were enough for multiple charges, but combined with the physical evidence from the greenhouse, the padlock, the adjusted heating controls, the blood on the floor, along with the forensic examination of the manipulated prenuptial agreement, the prosecution had more than enough. Dominic Mercer pleaded guilty to attempted murder, conspiracy, fraud, and identity theft. His lawyer argued diminished capacity due to coercion from his father. The judge was unimpressed. 20 years. Federal prison. No possibility of parole for 15. Victor Mercer fought every charge. Hired expensive lawyers with money no one could trace. Claimed his son acted alone. Claimed the recording was taken out of context. Claimed I had a vendetta against him dating back to the environmental case. None of it stuck. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. 25 years. He would be 92 before he saw the outside of a prison wall. I felt nothing when the verdicts came down. I thought I would feel satisfaction, relief, maybe even joy. But the courtroom was quiet in my chest. The rage I had carried since that morning on the greenhouse floor had burned itself out somewhere along the way, leaving behind only ash and a tired kind of peace. Claire did not attend either trial. She could not. Not yet. The first 2 weeks after the wedding were the worst. Claire moved back into her old bedroom at the estate and closed the door. She did not come down for meals. Did not answer her phone. Did not speak to me beyond single syllables when I knocked to check on her. I let her be. Left trays outside her door. Toast and tea in the morning. Soup and bread at night. Sometimes the tray came back empty. Sometimes it did not. I did not push, did not plead, did not try to explain or justify or comfort. She needed space to grieve. Not just the loss of Dominic, but the loss of the future she had imagined. The loss of the person she thought she was. The woman who could not be fooled. Who would never fall for a lie. That version of herself had died at the altar. and she needed time to mourn it. Week 3. A Tuesday morning. I was in the kitchen making coffee when I heard footsteps on the stairs. Slow, hesitant. Claire appeared in the doorway wearing sweatpants and one of Helen's old cardigans. Her hair was unwashed. Her face was bare and thin. She looked like she had aged 5 years and 15 days. She did not say anything. Just walked to the kitchen table and sat down. I poured a second cup of coffee and set it in front of her. Black. No sugar. The way Helen drank it. The way Claire had started drinking it after Helen died, as if adopting her mother's habits could keep her close. We sat in silence for 20 minutes. Then Claire picked up her cup, took one sip and said, "I think I need to talk to someone. A professional." I nodded. "I will find someone today." "Okay." She finished her coffee and went back upstairs. But the door stayed open. By the second month, Claire was seeing a trauma therapist twice a week. A woman named Dr. Reeves, who specialized in victims of psychological manipulation. Claire did not tell me what they discussed in those sessions. She did not need to. I could see it working. The color returning to her face. The gradual straightening of her shoulders. The moments when she almost smiled at something on television before catching herself. As if she was not sure she had permission to feel joy yet. Month 3. She started taking walks, short ones at first, around the estate grounds, past the gardens Elijah maintained, with the same meticulous care he had shown for 18 years. She would pause at the rosebed Helen had planted and stand there for a while, hands in her pockets, looking at nothing and everything. Month 4. She came to dinner. Not every night, but some nights. We talked about small things. The weather. A book she was reading. A restaurant in town that had changed owners. We did not talk about Dominic. We did not talk about the wedding. We did not talk about the greenhouse or the recordings or the moment her bouquet hit the floor. We would. Eventually. But not yet. Month 5. She laughed. A real laugh. At something Elijah said while trimming the hedges. I was watching from the kitchen window, and the sound of it, bright and unexpected, made my eyes sting. Month 6. On a Saturday morning in December, I was in the greenhouse watering the orchids when I heard the door open behind me. The creak of the hinge. The soft whisper of air moving. I turned. Claire stood in the doorway. She had not set foot in this building since before the wedding. 6 months of avoiding it. Walking around it. Pretending it did not exist at the back of the property. But here she was. Standing in the threshold. Looking at the jasmine on the top shelf. Looking at the repaired glass panel. Looking at the floor where her father almost died. Her eyes moved slowly around the space. Taking it in. All of it. Then they settled on me. "Hi, Dad," she said softly. "Hi, sweetheart." She stepped inside. She walked slowly. Her fingers trailed along the edge of the potting bench, skimming the worn wood the same way Helen used to. Her eyes moved from shelf to shelf, cataloging every plant, every pot, every inch of the space she had avoided for half a year. The greenhouse was warm, not dangerously so. Just the gentle warmth of a December morning trapped behind glass. The orchids were blooming, purple and white. The herbs on the middle shelf were thick and green, and on the top shelf, the jasmine was flowering, small white blossoms releasing their fragrance into the humid air. Helen's scent, Helen's legacy. Still alive, still growing. Claire stopped at the repaired panel. The new glass was slightly cleaner than the rest, its surface unmarked by years of weather and condensation. She pressed her hand flat against it. Held it there. "This is where it happened," she said. Not a question. "Yes. Right here." She looked down at the floor. The concrete had been scrubbed clean months ago. No trace of blood remained. No evidence that a man had nearly died on this spot. But Claire stared at it as if she could see through time to that morning, as if the floor remembered even if the stain did not. She turned and walked to the jasmine on the top shelf. reached up and touched one of the small white flowers. Gently, reverently, the way you touch. Something sacred. Mom loved this plant, she said, more than any other. She said it reminded her of her grandmother's porch in Savannah. Claire smiled. A small, fragile thing. Still new. Still learning how to exist on her face again. She walked the full circuit of the greenhouse. Past the orchids, past the herbs, past the ferns in the corner that Helen had rescued from a nursery going out of business the year before she got sick, past the wicker chair where I used to carry her. When she could no longer walk on her own, Claire stopped at the chair, touched its arm. Then she sat in it, slowly, carefully, as if lowering herself into a memory. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The greenhouse hummed around us, quiet, alive, holding us the way it had always held our family. Through joy, through grief, through violence, through healing. Dad, Claire said finally. Her voice was steady, calm in a way it had not been for months. Yes? Thank you. For saving me. Even though I hated you for it. I set down the watering can and turned to face her fully. She was looking at me with clear eyes. No tears, no anger, just something open and honest and hard-won. You had every right to hate me, I said. I know. She paused. But you were right. If you had told me that morning, if you had just said the words, I would not have believed you. I would have thought you were jealous, controlling. I would have married him anyway, and proven you wrong. Just to prove you wrong. I nodded. That was exactly what I had feared. I needed to hear it, she continued. From his own voice. In front of everyone. So there was no room for doubt. No room for him to explain it away later. She looked down at her hands. You knew that. You knew me well enough to know that was the only way. I have known you for 29 years, sweetheart. I know how your mind works. She laughed softly. Stubbornness runs in the family. Your mother always said it was determination. Same thing. Different packaging. We smiled at each other. And for the first time since that June morning, the distance between us felt like it was gone. Not shrinking. Gone. As if those 6 months of silence and pain had been a bridge we needed to cross to reach this exact moment. Dad, there is something else I want to tell you. I sat on the stool beside the potting bench and waited. Claire leaned forward in the wicker chair, her elbows resting on her knees. The December light came through the glass panels in soft, angled beams, catching dust motes and turning them to gold. I have been doing research, she said, about people like me. People who were targeted by romance scams, manipulated, deceived, made to believe something that was never real. She took a breath. There are so many of them, Dad. Thousands. And most of them have no one. No father who notices something wrong. No Elijah who shows up at 5:30 every morning. No recording device hidden behind a jasmine pot. They just get taken. Destroyed. And then they are alone with the wreckage. I listened without interrupting. Watching her face change as she spoke. Watching the grief transform into something else. Something that looked like purpose. I want to help them, she said. I want to start something. A foundation. Resources. Counseling. Legal support for victims. Early warning education. A place where people can come after they have been broken. And find help putting themselves back together. My chest tightened. Not with pain. With pride so intense it nearly stopped my breath. I think that is extraordinary, I said. Claire smiled. Wider now. Stronger. The smile of a woman who had walked through fire and decided to build something from the ashes instead of sitting in them. I already have a name, she said. She looked at the jasmine above us, at the orchids and the herbs and the chair where her mother used to sit, at the greenhouse that had been a sanctuary and a prison, and now, somehow, both a grave marker and a cradle. I am going to call it Helen's Garden. The words settled into the warm air around us. Helen's Garden. Named for a woman who built things that grew, who believed in tending, in patience, in the slow, stubborn miracle of life returning to soil that had been scorched. I could not speak. My throat had closed entirely, so I just nodded, and Claire nodded back. And between us, in the quiet of that greenhouse, something new took root. 10 months after the morning I almost died in my own greenhouse, I watched my daughter stand before a room full of strangers and tell her story. The Helen's Garden Foundation launched on a Thursday afternoon in April. A rented ballroom in downtown Asheville, decorated simply. White tablecloths, green centerpieces made from herbs and ferns, the kind Helen would have chosen. A small podium at the front with a banner behind it. Helen's Garden. Growing strength. From broken ground. Claire designed the logo herself. A sprig of jasmine inside a circle of green. Simple, elegant, unmistakable. 80 people attended the launch. Social workers, therapists, lawyers who had volunteered their services, representatives from women's shelters across western North Carolina, a few local journalists, and at the back of the room, standing quietly by the door in his work boots and pressed flannel shirt, Elijah Monroe. He had refused a seat, said he preferred to stand where he could see everything. Some habits do not change. Claire spoke for 12 minutes. No notes, no teleprompter, just her voice and her story, and the quiet courage of a woman who had decided that the worst thing that ever happened to her would become the best thing she ever did for someone else. She did not mention Dominic by name, did not mention Victor, did not describe the greenhouse or the recordings or the moment her bouquet hit the stone floor of First Presbyterian Church. She spoke instead about trust, about vulnerability, about the particular cruelty of being deceived by someone you love, and about the possibility of rebuilding. You do not have to rebuild alone, she said, her voice clear and steady. That is why this foundation exists, because no one should face that kind of darkness without a hand to hold. I sat in the front row and watched her with a pride so deep it ached. This woman, my daughter, Helen's daughter, standing tall in a room full of people, turning her pain into a shelter for others. She was not broken. She had never been broken. She had been cracked open, and what grew from those cracks was stronger than anything that came before. After the event, I drove home alone. The April evening was cool and clear. Dogwood blossoms lined the roads like scattered confetti. The Blue Ridge Mountains glowed purple in the distance. Asheville at its finest. The city where Helen and I had built everything. The city where Claire was now building something new. I parked in the driveway and walked straight to the greenhouse. It was nearly dark, but enough light remained to see. The orchids on the middle shelf. The herbs by the window. The jasmine on top. Blooming white and fragrant in the warm air. I watered them the way I always did. Slowly, carefully, following Helen's schedule, talking to her while I worked the way I always did. She did it, sweetheart. She took the worst thing and made it mean something. You would be so proud of her. The jasmine released its perfume into the evening air. Sweet and clean. Helen's answer. The next morning, Saturday, I woke early, made coffee, carried it outside to the greenhouse in 2 mugs. At 5:45, Elijah appeared on the garden path. Same as every morning. Same quiet nod. Same steady hands, reaching for his tools. 18 years and counting. Good morning, Mr. Holloway. Good morning, Elijah. He noticed the second mug. Took it without comment. We stood together in the greenhouse doorway, watching the sun rise over the mountains, drinking coffee in a silence that required no words. At 7:15, the front door of the house opened. Claire walked across the lawn in her slippers and Helen's old cardigan. She carried her own mug. She had been doing this for weeks now, coming to the greenhouse in the morning, sitting in Helen's wicker chair, sometimes reading, sometimes just breathing in the warm air and the scent of jasmine. "Morning, Dad." "Morning, Elijah." "Morning, sweetheart." "Morning, Miss Claire." She settled into the chair, wrapped both hands around her mug, looked out through the glass walls at the garden beyond. The roses were budding. The magnolia was in full bloom. Everything waking up, everything growing. We did not talk about Dominic. We did not talk about the wedding. We did not talk about the past. We talked about the future, about the foundation's first clients, about a therapy group Claire was organizing, about a new orchid variety Elijah had ordered from a nursery in Charleston. We talked about life, ongoing, imperfect, good. And to you listening to this story right now, wherever you are, whatever you are facing, I want to leave you with this. God gives us instincts for a reason. That weight I felt in my chest on the morning of the wedding, that nameless unease I could not explain, that was not anxiety. That was not paranoia. That was a warning. A whisper from somewhere beyond my understanding, telling me to pay attention, telling me something was wrong. I almost ignored it. I almost let politeness and fear of conflict and the desire to see my daughter happy override the voice inside me that said something is not right. Do not make that mistake. If you feel it, trust it. If something in your gut tells you that a person is not what they seem, listen. Ask the questions. Do the research. Have the hard conversations. Yes, your loved ones might be angry. Yes, they might push you away. But anger fades. Deception does not. God whispered to me through that unease. He whispered again through Elijah's faithfulness, arriving every morning at 5:30 for 18 years. He whispered through Helen's greenhouse, the very place meant to be my grave, becoming the source of my salvation. And he whispered through my daughter's courage, transforming destruction into a foundation that will help countless others. Trust those whispers. They might just save a life. If this story touched something in you, I would be grateful if you would subscribe to this channel for more stories like this one. Leave a comment telling me what you would have done in my situation. And if you know someone who needs to hear this, someone who might be in danger, someone whose instincts are telling them something is wrong, share this story with them. Your share might be the whisper they need. Thank you for staying until the end. God bless you and your family. The greenhouse still stands behind our house. Every morning, I water Helen's roses. And every morning, Claire walks in with coffee for two. We do not talk about what happened. We talk about what is growing. And the garden keeps growing.